Hello and welcome to On Second Thought with Mike and Luke, an ongoing conversation about the underlying connections and root causes which shape our lives through various ideas and current events. As we chase what's true, let's continue to recalibrate our thoughts and refocus our energies to engage honestly and graciously with a hostile culture. Today we're going to discuss two gender rivalries, two political narratives, and two conspiracies. How's that for two, and two?
I love conspiracies.
Well, this is going to be, you'll like my question then. But let's just start off. Hey, it's been 10 days.
Yeah.
We had a bunch of stuff. Of course, we had Thanksgiving, but things in personal lives. And so it's a long time to go in between. But we had holidays.
Yes, we did.
Did you see people you hadn't seen in a long time? I did.
My family's pretty close. We alternate our Thanksgiving between my family and my wife's. So we were at my wife's, her and her sisters, and
you don't
the kids
see
are
any
all
people that aren't common. We always see people from out of town, whether they're our friends or friends of our friends.
We all live pretty close.
Yeah.
So the farthest is Portland, an hour and a half. But I see them probably every other month.
I think what's interesting is at the holidays, we are often in new contexts of people. Yeah. And so two things happen. I'm curious if this happened to you. Number one, the questions that we talk about pretty regularly, did you find yourself wanting to ask
I tried
here or there?
But they know me, that whole group, they don't take the bait.
Oh.
I sat down to dinner, right? And I said, okay, what do we think about Trump? As just like an icebreaker.
Like they don't let you be provocative.
And it was just like crickets. And I was like, fine.
Oh, that's funny.
They
Not
wouldn't do
me,
it.
man. I saw a bunch of people I haven't seen in a long time in different contexts, and we talked about these things, and I had some great conversations.
We did get to know, there was a new... My brother and sister-in-law have a nanny, and she and her fiance came and had Thanksgiving with us. So getting to know him was kind of fun. I know her pretty well. But.
Yeah. The other thing I noticed about holidays, that there's the topic question. In fact, I saw a number of articles, how not to destroy your Thanksgiving with certain conversations. Then I saw some sad articles about how these holidays, there have been relationships destroyed because of the woke agenda and the enforcement upon it by young people.
Well, COVID.
Yeah, and
COVID destroyed a lot of
holidays
for sure.
But you see a lot of kids at the holidays too, and other people's kids.
And other people's kids. I think about that a lot, and the dynamics of whose house is this and who's in charge of what part of dinner.
That's right.
Is there stress about the turkey?
Yeah.
I'm always sort of like watching people's kids. I think a lot about that, and I think about how much of raising kids is negotiating, and I feel like I've been noticing this a lot.
They're negotiating with their kids.
Yeah, all discipline is a negotiation because they can fight you, and they do. That's what you're dealing with usually.
Yeah.
But I just think about okay, when does a kid become a tyrant, right? And none of the kids at our holiday were tyrants, but there's a little tyrant in all of us.
Yes, right.
So the number one rule of tyrants is you don't negotiate with them.
Yeah.
Right? Because they only understand power.
Yeah.
And so there is a point, I believe, as a parent, you have to first establish your power over your child. Once you've done that, and I call it teaching them to be told no. Mm-hmm. Once they understand that when the parent says no, it's real.
Yeah.
And now I can be at peace. Yeah. And what I think is kids who don't know how to accept no are so stressed out.
Yeah. Yeah,
because everything's a negotiation, everything's a fight all the time.
Yeah.
What's the snack? What's the meal? What's the if you fought the fight once and won it, and then all you'd have to do is maintenance.
Yeah, that's true. Well, one of the other complications is when you go to other people's houses, what you fight for in yours may not be what they fight for in theirs.
Yeah,
and so then you find yourself irritated with their parenting. And it just may be different points of emphasis. You draw the line.
And holidays are food, and picky about food was one of my things you don't get to do, and that's definitely not a hill.
Okay, let's start off with our quick question here. We've got a lot of ground covered today, and we're gonna do it.
Are we gonna catch up for 10 days worth?
That is very tempting, but we got to say
I don't think. Yeah, we'll be 3 hours in. Although I've listened to some 3-hour podcasts lately, and I enjoy it. It just keeps going, and I'm doing something. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. All right, here's the question. This is the two conspiracies here.
All right.
Okay, so did you see the article? And this was about 10 days ago now or so, that came out with the journalists embedded with Hamas. And they questioned, did they know These are journalists from the West that were over with Hamas.
I didn't see that, but
New
I
York
know that
Times
the New York
being one
Times
of
has
them?
been in with some terrorist-affiliated journalists for a while.
Yes.
So that would make sense.
Yes. So the issue was that they were embedded, and the question then rose, did the New York Times know about this? Did they know before October 7?
Oh,
And
right.
that raises a peculiar question. And here's where we get the two conspiracies. And I'll just throw a thought to you. We know that FDR, it's been shown now with revealed back data,
Pearl Harbor.
he knew that Pearl Harbor, he knew enough to know something was going to happen. It was unclear what that something was going to be.
Yeah.
But they knew enough, and it's now been shown FDR was an expert manipulator as an individual.
For sure.
And so he wanted to get in the war. In hindsight, it was probably the right decision. America, in its population, was protectionist. It's their war, let them do it. They regretted World War I and their involvement, et cetera, et cetera. He thinks we got to get into it. So he lets this invasion happen. Right?
Okay.
Now, here's the question. Stemming from this, now we know that probably the New York Times and perhaps others knew something was happening. Do they have a responsibility to say something or go get the scoop? And number two, do we have, as Christians, do we have to say, to leave room for this? We could find out someday that Bibi himself, because one of the things that we can't figure out is, how did this happen to Israel?
Right.
One of the greatest military and detective networks. How did this
And it
tragedy
was so
take
extensive.
place? Well,
I mean,
there's
as
no
far as the
evidence for it.
compromise.
But what if he did know
Right.
and let it happen?
People have been asking that. Even pro-Israel people from the beginning were saying, what's up with that?
There's an unanswered gray thing, right? How did this happen to Israel, one of the elite spy networks?
What have we talked about when it comes to Israel before this all happened, except their intelligence? That's what they're known for. Their intelligence
premier in the
agencies.
world. That's right.
Yeah. Going back to FDR, the thought, I have a hard time believing he knew and wanted it to happen. He did want America into the war.
Yes.
Yeah, we know that. Part of the reason is I don't trust intelligence as an indicator of someone should have taken action. So
I know what you mean by that.
because there's so much intelligence and you're constantly having to
Hindsight is
analyze it.
2020.
And people did that after 9/11.
That's true.
And they went back and said, look at all the ways we should have known. And I see conservatives doing this to dog on the FBI, who, hey, I'm a fan of dogging on the FBI at times. But to say, well, they had known about this shooter, therefore they should have stopped it. It's like they know about are they supposed to keep track of every mentally ill teenager in America?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that's realistic.
Right.
So the other side of that is intelligence-wise, like I remember hearing about the banners that U.S. dropped, like pamphlets, not banners, pamphlets that we dropped over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, telling them that we were going to drop a bomb.
Yeah.
And I thought, whoa, that's crazy. So therefore, like the guilt over America's, America sometimes wants to be shamed over the bombs. But the reality is we put those pamphlets in like 20 cities. So it's an overload, and you just think, oh, this is more propaganda. I can't believe it.
It was too many.
It's just like the pamphlets they're dropping saying surrender.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Maybe it convinces people, but it's all part of a psychological.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's the two conspiracies. Hey, if you're enjoying the conversation so far, we want to make our subscribe plug here. You can click subscribe and you can get a notification. I actually, over the last 2 days, got the first question. When's your next podcast?
Ooh.
How do I get your next one? Well, hit subscribe. You get a notification.
It'll send it right to you.
And you can also click like, leave a comment or review. We're going to share about one of the comments we got. And then share with a friend. Hey, how do you like sitting on that side, by the way?
Oh, yeah, we switched.
We switched sides.
I've had a
computer problem,
perpetual issue with my laptop's battery, and it died again. So now I'm stealing.
But
my
I
son's
noticed myself
computer.
sitting up straighter, even though we already talked about it. And I noticed you sitting at an angle.
I know. I'm like, I want to lounge and be off screen. Well, this whole one phone thing is another change we're doing too. But
we're trying it out.
Apparently, it's getting positive.
All right, let's
reviews.
talk about two political stories. There's two narratives going on. Well, first, let's just ask this: did you see the article about Wayne Root promoting the new Democratic ticket
I looked at it, but remind me.
This is when Biden. So this is a few days old now. When Biden, the poll numbers started coming out worse and worse, and it's declining. And he said, "Here's going to be the new ticket. It's not going to be Biden. It's not going to be Harris. It's going to be." And he took up from our conversations.
Oh yeah, he was probably listening.
He was probably listening.
Michelle and what's his name?
Michelle and Newsom.
So
Now,
who's number one?
Newsom is 1 and Michelle's 2 because she doesn't want to do it.
There's no way Michelle would be 2 though.
Here was his point.
That would get Obama back in the White House.
It would get him there. But see, I think that's the dilemma with his proposal. I like it because I think he's thinking about a difficult thing. But the problem is, it uses her to leverage, but it puts Newsom with power. And I don't know that Obama wants that.
Well, but if Newsom is the guy who says, I'm willing to play ball, he's openly not running while running.
Okay, to
say to the established powers, look, I'll play along as long as Biden's in there.
I know.
I agree that it's likely Biden's coming out. I could see why having Michelle number 2 would make sense. The big cultural thing you have to overcome is the Bill Burr stand-up bit about Michelle. Did you ever hear that one?
No.
He was ranting. This was I think 2015.
He's a great ranter, by the way. One of the best.
2015, he was ranting about why does being the wife of the president qualify you to be the president? Like, what did you do?
Right.
You went along?
Yeah.
You know, like, my husband's a fireman. Call me when there's a fire.
Exactly.
No, what? And so I think that could gain traction pretty quickly. But to say, oh, Michelle is backing Newsom and they're a team and she's on the team and she's got potential and maybe she could go next.
Yeah.
It would get her that experience to overcome that sense of you don't know what you're doing.
The Newsom campaign. I just saw an article from the Federalist actually today, and one of their authors proposed, he called it the campaign DeSantis should have run. And he said he should have run it like Newsom. Not tried to take out Trump, but if he's going to prevail, then let him prevail and wait.
Yeah.
If not, wait for something bad to happen and be supportive. And what this author was saying, of course, this author would differ. This author, it seemed, was a little, he thinks DeSantis has slipped too far back, okay? Be that as it may, you have a different perspective, and that's not the conversation. The conversation is, should DeSantis, Newsom is running a campaign.
Right.
It is not conventional because of the unique circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Could DeSantis have run that campaign?
Could he have done it that way?
Could he have done it that way? And would it have been just as brilliant?
The trick with Newsom's campaign is it's only Newsom doing this, and there's nobody else but Biden. DeSantis...
You could say a similar thing.
Well, but DeSantis has to think of the debates.
I know.
He's still got Vivek. He's still got Nikki Haley. Those are the 2 main ones now. I think if everybody else isn't gone... He's going to
stay in it because the media wants him to.
Yeah, he's just keeping his pundit chair
that's right.
warm so he can stay on the news networks.
And
I don't think it would work. I think they would ignore him because the media sees Newsom as a savior, and nobody sees DeSantis as a savior.
Yeah.
And also, because it's only Newsom doing it, it gives him the limelight in a way that DeSantis couldn't have gotten.
Yeah.
But did you hear about so Bob Vanderplatz is an Iowa kind of kingmaker, right? Mm-hmm. The family leader is his nonprofit, Christian, conservative, political action, whatever.
They tried to tar him.
So they're saying he did it for money.
Yeah.
And he's hot.
Yeah.
I listened to an interview with him today.
What's interesting,
it was
I
guns
think
blazing
about
Trump.
I think that happens all the time. But when I read about him, I wasn't familiar with him beforehand. But when I read the story and looked into it a little bit, I thought, it just doesn't smell that way at all.
Well, and the claim is that there was an event where all the candidates came, and you could pay extra to go to this dinner where the pundits would be and where other donors would be listening. And so several of the candidates did, including DeSantis. But because DeSantis did, they're saying, well, that was the bribe.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, all the candidates had the opportunity, and some of them...
Vivek had a similar thing. You remember early on when he said he was told he got a call, we can make you the number one thing at the first debate if you pay this much money. We can make you the highest promoted. And he just says, that's not...
Who did that?
Ramaswamy, Vivek.
Yeah, but who called him?
Somebody from the RNC.
Oh, well, the RNC, that's how they roll.
I know.
But to say to the Christian Iowa people, like, that's another level.
But my point is, it's common practice to function that way.
Right.
And so when you see something that looks like it, it may be it, or it may be not it at all. And that one didn't smell.
Well,
to me
in
like
that
it
interview
was.
with Vanderplatz, he said, Trump tried to pay him off for stuff when it was 2016.
Yeah.
He tried to pay, I think he donated $1 million to the nonprofit, and then with a wink and a nod, hoping to get that endorsement last time.
We're talking now about two political stories here. We're going to have a couple other points. Tell me about your soldiers point. What you have something about soldiers there.
Yeah, so
two storylines.
Soldiers in Afghanistan. So there's two things about soldiers, actually. One is the soldiers in Afghanistan who left their gear behind. Mm-hmm. Which they were ordered to do.
Right.
In the hurried evacuation where I think 13 U.S. soldiers died and dozens were injured. And so mismanaged. And I've listened to extensive interviews with soldiers who were there.
Yeah.
So this week, one of the U.S. soldiers put online, they're charging him. They're docking his pay.
Oh my goodness!
For the equipment
I did not see
that he was required to leave behind, ordered to leave behind.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, I was talking to my wife, like, there's no way that I would want my sons to be in the military, which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
I never would have thought I would say that.
Yeah.
The second story is that they're going with hat in hand. The recruiters are back to the soldiers.
I saw that one.
The soldiers who were dishonorably discharged for refusing the vaccine and saying, hey, come on back.
And you saw the public letter that somebody came out with?
I didn't.
One commander, he came out with the letter, and his written response to the letter, he put it, I think he put it on Twitter, and it was just an exposure of shameful behavior by the military in the lead up and the expulsion of these people, and then in the attempt to bring them back as just...
So this is very clearly, and I distinctly remember during Obama's second term, that he was going with a purpose through the ranks of the leadership in the military and firing generals who wouldn't step to what he wanted.
Yeah.
And it was like a purge going on.
Yeah.
And at the time, I remember having conversations with people saying, is this guy going to try to stay in office?
Yeah.
That seems crazy, right?
Yeah.
Whereas now it's like, oh, he just found another way to stay in office.
Yeah.
And the same is true if you think of like how many generals came out saying, we don't back Trump when he ran for re-election.
Yeah.
And how they would be charged with a crime if they had done that in any other administration.
Yeah, that's right.
So the whole military is bought and paid for by the machine now.
What's interesting about it, too, I think, from a historical perspective, is I remember when Clinton was first in office, he was the first 60s guy, right?
Yeah.
Kid from the 60s. And one of the points Rush made over and over, and I thought it was true, is that the Clintons, they despised the military. But they despised it as former hippies.
Right.
Obama despised it in a way to dismantle.
Yeah.
They wanted to undercut it, undermine it, but they were still, in a sense, centrist enough, right? But Obama is, I want to take it apart. And like you said, own it.
Yeah.
Own it. So we have two narratives going on, I think, here. One of the things in talking with people over the weekend and being Thanksgiving weekend, just thinking about what is the force of these two stories. I saw an interesting article from Molly Hemingway at the Federalist about the media, that they're getting their stories. They don't get them wrong on accident. It's on purpose.
Okay.
And they have not just lost credibility, but they don't deserve to be revived. These are not accidents. And I read through that, and I thought she made some good points, but it got me thinking about it. The reality is there are two narratives that function in the world now, or in our nation. And there is one America that is still theistic, God-oriented, and from it flow a number of ways of behaving and living.
Yeah.
And then there's this other one that is secular and God-rejecting. And the reality is, I was thinking about what she was saying about why they write these stories, and I was thinking, part of it is they live in a different ecosystem now, an idea ecosystem. It is without God and the things that flow from that. And so that does two things, I think. Number one, it gives them permission in their minds to say, and this is what happened when Trump was elected, warfare, information warfare. We're going to go to war. The press and journalists, this is Hitler, and we're going to take him out.
That's right.
And because their worldview doesn't like what he's doing politically, they say they don't realize that they're driven by this nihilistic, no holds barred approach that is amoral. That being truthful, actually, from their perspective, from the Prince and Machiavellian, it's okay. It's
Being
okay
untruthful.
to lie
Yeah.
to get your political end. And that was not something that was believed in our nation prior to that. That
Right.
theism held sway so that when you disagree, I got to persuade you by showing what's true.
And you got to show why it's good.
Yeah, that's right. Why my vision is better than your vision. And that's gone now. And then the second step, I think, is the whip. They're willing to beat into submission those who disagree with them now.
Yeah.
And so you have, in a sense, two Americas now. The one that is still theistically based, that still thinks you should speak the truth. And if you win a campaign and you're a progressive and I'm a conservative, the conservative thinks to themselves, well, you outdid me. All right, you get your term. I'm going to try to beat you next time. I'm going to try to convince the voters next time.
Right.
Right? But the left doesn't view it that way. Any
Well,
means possible.
and the left meaning the not the liberals.
No, it's the progressive
It's
left.
the progressive
that is
authoritarian
now
left.
sweeping
Yeah.
in liberalism.
Right.
And I think when you say the military gear, the right never would have done that. They never would have told them to lead their gear. They never would take those kinds of actions.
I think part of it too is there's I don't know if it's hatred. I'll say it. I mean, I want to use the word despise, right? They despise what America is.
I agree.
So therefore, the goal is not even to gain power. The goal is to destroy what America
dismantle.
is.
Yeah. I
And
agree.
the hard part is, what's their actual vision? Like in the past, liberal vision for the future is like, oh, we want to be like Europe,
Yeah.
right? And Europe's not looking so great lately with the mass immigration that they've brought in. And I was thinking about this. This is a politically incorrect thing to say, but our mass immigrants, by and large, are Catholics, right? They're coming in from Central South America, and they have a Christian foundation to how they look at the world.
They have a theism involved with their root nature.
What's deeper than theism,
Yeah.
right? Because Muslims are theistic,
Yeah.
but there's a big problem
That's
with
true.
Muslim culture invading Europe.
That's true.
A problem that we don't have.
Right.
In
That's
so many
true.
ways. And I was looking back at Facebook reminds me of posts.
You're right. It's more than theism. It's a further Christian doctrine
It's
on top of the theism.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
And I personally think, I was looking back at memories Facebook brings, right? And I had a post, I want to say early 2020. It might have been before even. It might have been like, at any rate, it was about, we need a Statue of Liberty at our southern border. Like we put the Statue of Liberty in New York because there was Ellis Island and they were coming.
entrance.
They were coming,
That's
right?
a
The
good
poor
point.
from Europe.
Yeah, I hear you.
We've got them coming from Central and South America. I want them to come. I want them to be legal.
To come
My
legally,
biggest
yeah.
problem is the cartels running our border instead of us. But
yeah.
all the danger and corruption and evil that comes from that. I don't want to be Europe right now.
Yeah. Two competing stories. Tell me about Twitter suing Media Matters. Media Matters has behaved in such a way that Musk says this isn't right. Two stories that clash here. What's going on?
And well, actually, before I jump to that, I wanted
Yeah.
to get back to that. The problem, the thing that scares me about the progressive authoritarian left is that I don't know what their picture of the future is, except the communist Soviet Union. Like, I just don't know. Do they envision China? Is that now what they want it to be, where
Do they have
technologically they
a
rule over your
positive
thinking?
vision?
Well,
does woke have
what they
a
claim
positive-
is that they want equality for right? Equal
That's right.
outcomes for
That's
everyone.
Right. That's right.
But that never ends. There's always
I know.
more
You're
minutia
right.
you can analyze.
right.
Like, why do tall people
That's
make
right.
more money than
That's right.
than short people? We've got to stop this, right? It's
right.
oppression by the tall people.
That's right.
You could come up with anything.
Yeah.
So to me, that can't actually be what they're going for.
I agree with you.
That's their pitch to
Yeah.
the kind-hearted, compassionate people who want things to be fair.
Yeah. What do you think they're going for?
I think it's a totalitarian China. I think that's their picture. And if that's it, it's worth fighting. It's worth fighting by any means almost.
See, I don't think it's that.
Any godly means.
But though my answer will be close to yours, I think it's destruction. I don't think they have a vision of what they want positively.
So you think it's like Hitler? It's either ours or we
yes,
burn it.
I do. I think China has a positive vision of which its totalitarian control serves a vision. And it is that China be the greatest nation on the earth. The people of China.
Right.
And they're okay if their people are somewhat trampled on in order to achieve that, because it's for the good of the glory of the nation.
Right.
There's nothing like
that's
that
very
in
Asian,
the progressive left.
Eastern Asian cultures are very way less individualistic than ours. For
But
sure.
see, even Nazi Germany, Hitler loved art. He wanted Germany to be the pinnacle of Europe and the world from an artist beauty perspective, and he stole art and destroyed other people in order to achieve that end.
Right.
I don't think the progressive left has one of those. I don't think they have a vision of a good, other than, like you said, the equality, which is a standby answer, but it doesn't hold up.
I heard somebody describing, I think it was, they were talking about how Churchill viewed Hitler versus everybody else, right? Because a lot of people in
Mussolini.
England wanted to negotiate with Hitler.
Yeah.
Chamberlain famously, right?
Yep.
And Churchill said, no, it won't work because he wants to burn it down. Like he's a tyrant. If I can't have it, no one can.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that's where they're at,
That's true. If
That
I can't
starts-
have it, I'll burn it down.
right.
That's true.
That to me, that's the mind of a school shooter. It's like, I'm going to make them pay for not letting me have to,
Yep.
for the world that gave me this pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, that's a dark place.
I agree. All right. Tell me about Twitter suing Media Matters.
All right, so Media Matters
intrigued
put out a
you about
story
that?
last week saying that these big companies, Apple, Microsoft, IBM, pro-Nazi content was appearing next to their ads. Well, it turns out they faked it. So they created
manipulating.
accounts.
Yeah.
Then they went through with this brand new account and tried to like and follow and share every single
This
Nazi.
is psyop warfare.
Right. But even then, so the Twitter actually counteracted because then they posted this article showing screenshots. Look, the Nazi content was right next to Apple. And IBM and Apple, all these big companies started pulling their ads off of X.
Yeah.
And so what the Twitter X people said was, well, we're going to go in and we actually look at the log. It's never happened.
Yeah.
Right? That they could, if they really tried, they could get one Apple thing to appear next to something.
Yeah.
But like IBM, it never happened. This, it never happened. It was fake. And so this was over last weekend.
Yep.
And Elon says Monday morning, get ready for an atomic bomb lawsuit coming after Media Matters and the George Soros funding that's coming for it. So not only that, Ken Paxton is the Secretary of State?
No.
DA?
Not DA.
He's something in Texas. He's opening Attorney General. There you go. He's opening a criminal investigation
He's joined
to
with
Media
it.
Matters.
Yeah.
So it could be, it's going to be a showdown.
A tremendous fighter. He's
Didn't they try
interesting.
to impeach him?
Yes, they did.
And they failed, right?
they
And that was, I heard it was Bush money. It was the old line
Bush is
Republicans
involved
trying to
in it.
overthrow
I know, it's sad.
the genuine article.
Yeah, so the Media Matters thing is interesting. What I found interesting about it was this. Musk trying to do what others have failed to do, and is to point out the conspiracy, so to speak. This is blatantly false.
Right.
And so I'm going to sue you. What's interesting about it is that has not been successful to date, but nobody has, it's almost like Soros money versus Musk money.
Yeah, and Musk has got the money too.
And he's got the money to do it. But does he have the jurisdictions in courts? Does he have media on his side?
But part of what we're seeing is Media Matters, I think, still represents, like the New York Times, the legacy media who think we deserve it because we've always had it.
Yeah.
And so what Musk represents is saying, no, actually, it's a free exchange of ideas on this platform.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's more than a battle of free speech versus authoritarianism. I think it's a battle of old media versus new media.
Yeah.
Even though Media Matters is obviously new media in the tech sense, like they're online, but they still represent the establishment.
Well, hey, we're about halfway here. We're gonna say a little support thing we've been working on, but I'm not gonna read the one you've been doing, and then you'll have to tell me afterwards if you hate it or like it. But if you like what you're hearing, Luke actually runs a school.
Yeah.
Tries to talk to kids, and make them think and have second thoughts about things. Makes them read books, makes them learn math. There's lots of things they have to do as a part of the discipline and behavior, but not behavior discipline, but the discipline of doing things like math and science and whatnot. Yeah. But also asking questions about things that come up in the reading and forcing kids to think, to learn to learn. That's
it's so
what
fun.
I think about it.
Yeah.
I
tell them is think like a boss and not like an employee.
Yeah.
Or be a driver in your life.
If you like that, you can support Luke financially. You can also look into it if you say you're tired of your kids being in a government-run school. They're trying to brainwash your kids. You could have them in a different setting.
Well, and you can support me financially. But the Trinity School, I mean, part of it is, especially the connections that we have here in a small town. There are several students that come, they can't afford tuition. And I just let them come anyway.
Yeah.
And so if you want to support it, what you're really doing is supporting a kid's tuition.
That's a good point.
So that I can actually get paid to be a teacher.
Go to gracedayton.com/Trinity School. You can find out more about doing that. All right, let me ask another question here. We're going to move into a continuing discussion, 2 gender stories, but let me ask a question on that line. Woman on a Mission. You got a couple movie references here.
So there's been several big movies come out, and then more to come.
There's more than even you've got listed here.
Yeah, and they're not doing well.
No,
right?
They're not.
And they all have a similar storyline.
Yeah.
And I was thinking I like to think about the psychology of God's design, right? Because I think psychology and understanding God's design are basically the same.
Or as the Proverbs would say it, here is wisdom that God put in the world. It's the way the world functions.
It's the way it is.
It is intended by God to function in a certain way.
Yeah. So
and in general, that brings good.
And not only does it bring good, but it's going to create a movie that stirs you to think that was important.
If
or that
the
mattered.
movie is aligned with this general narrative of the world the way God meant it to be.
Yeah, because it's true.
Yeah.
Right? And truth is beautiful.
That's right.
Right.
Chesterton said that all story is grounded in Genesis 3, ending up in Revelation. That there's a problem and that there is a redemption and a rescue.
Yeah.
And actually, anyway.
I mean, you see storylines repeat throughout, right?
Yeah.
Like, why do most every movies have to have a romantic thread somewhere?
Yeah, that's right.
Because we were made to be in love,
That's
right?
Okay. That's right.
So the common theme, I was looking at the movie Wish, which is the new Disney princess movie.
Yeah.
The Marvels, which I haven't seen any of these.
Marvels, the second one.
Yeah.
It's Marvel.
I don't think it is. But anyway.
Okay.
And then there was a trailer for a really cool animated samurai movie, Blue-Eyed Samurai.
Yeah.
But they're all women in the lead on a mission.
Yeah.
And obviously it flips a little bit the gender stereotype of a man on a mission with a woman assisting. And I was thinking about, in fact, over Thanksgiving, talking about Star Wars, the original trilogy. And Princess Leia is this bold, outspoken, demanding woman who gives it, and you know, to Han Solo.
70s era.
But if you go back and watch that, when they actually begin a romantic relationship, her mode changes.
That's right.
She begins to defer to him. She becomes and it kind of culminates in that classic line where she says, "I love you," and he says, "I know."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Which is like the kind of 70s macho too.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so here's my question.
Yeah.
The Bible describes woman as the helpmate to the man, and it's a very controversial idea, but seems to be from creation, Adam and Eve, right? So a lot of the debate around what does the Bible say about women's role in the church or women's role in marriage, and what did they really mean, these biblical authors? And is that Paul or is that Jesus and all these things? But even when in the New Testament, somebody's talking about marriage, they so often refer back to Adam and Eve. Like, okay. So the idea of Adam and Eve, if you look at it, is Adam has this mission, this dominion mandate, and now he's also got this woman, and together they're going to fulfill this mission, but she's the help to him. And so what these movies are doing is kind of reversing it. Well, actually, usually when they reverse it, the man kind of drops off. And so when these movies get reversed, and now the woman's on a mission, the romantic lead falls away.
Yeah.
And the first big one for that was Frozen.
Yeah.
And I think because it worked in Frozen as far as financially, people thought it was going to keep working, and they've made all these movies subsequently, but now it's faltering.
Yeah.
So part of my question is it faltering because people are rejecting the concept?
Always work out. Exceptions are always okay.
It's a fresh new take on it, and women don't have to be...
It happens. It's the old 80-20.
Absolutely.
bell curve, right? There are outliers.
Yeah. So my thought was, is this actually is the pull back from these stories an actual, like, people saying, reacting to how God designed them? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It does. I don't know what you thought, how I would hear it, but I think this is completely accurate. It is not comporting with the fundamental nature of the world, and in particular, male and female. The second section we're going to talk about here is all about the two gender, is this issue of the genders and the elements of conflict. And the only thing I would have said different than what you said is I would have said of Eve that she was made also to have dominion, but the way they're both going to exercise it is going to look different. And your mission point, I think, is spot on. I think it's the mission. Men feel a mission to go out and conquer something. I don't think women necessarily feel that in the 80-20 split idea in general.
Yeah.
They feel a caretaking. I want to nurture. I want to support what's been done. I want to take care.
Which is a mission.
It is its own kind of, it's a dominion. It's its own kind. And I think in general, it's a feminine kind, and there is a masculine kind. And the movies are taking offense of that, and they're flipping those.
Well,
and
or
it doesn't resonate.
Are they
over
taking
time.
offense, or are they trying to sell offense?
Oh yeah, well,
Do you know what I mean? They assume
Yep.
everyone's offended, and therefore that's the pitch they're going to sell. But now people aren't buying it as much.
Well, wouldn't it be this whole matter of the two stories? How far you're into your own worldview is how far you think everyone else, is. How far you bought into it is how much you think they really want to hear this.
So I went and I looked at I found a really cool graph for the reviews. So IMDb, the Internet Movie Database. Yep. I was looking at the reviews and the numbers, and they give the average review score of users.
Run by Amazon, by the way, now.
Nice. Okay.
I've
taken over everything.
Trusting it.
Okay. But here was what the graph showed. Vertically, it was 1 to 10.
Yeah.
And then across was how many people voted for each one.
Yeah.
And you should get a standard distribution, which would be like that there would be outliers, like you're saying, and a big clump in the middle, and that's going to move up and down.
Yeah, yeah.
But what I saw was that clump and then a spike at 10 and a spike at 1 for these movies.
Interesting.
So whenever you have two peaks in a data set or more, what it means is you've got outside influences.
Yeah.
So what I assume when I look at that data is that main cluster is the normal people just going to a movie and saying whether they liked it.
Yeah.
Then you've got the politically motivated or the outside motivated.
Yeah.
Marvel's is woke or yay, Marvel's is woke, right?
Or
Both. And they're doing the 10s and the 1s.
Yep.
And so that's the divide. And what will be interesting is, do those get bigger, the 10s and the 1s, and the middle goes down? That would show our culture breaking apart more and more.
Yeah.
But they weren't, some of them, the 10s and the 1s were bigger than the main center.
Yeah. What I like about your point is that the putting on a mission for this woman, rather than that occasionally being true, because occasionally it's true.
Yeah.
But making it, this is the standard storyline, people don't resonate with it. They don't enjoy it. It doesn't fit the man going to see the movie, and it doesn't fit the woman going to see the movie.
Right.
And so when they don't, which is, frankly, this is why I think the Top Gun Maverick was so successful. It avoided that.
It was just an old-fashioned
regular movie.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as brilliant as the first one, but it was a good movie, and that alone was enough to make it really successful.
Yeah, especially in a drought of any kind of good movies,
yeah.
Right. The thing I was thinking about, well, I enjoyed Top Gun Maverick. I'll say that I did see it in the theater. I would never watch it again. To me, it was so predictable and obvious. But the minute it dawned on me that, you could have just sent a drone. The whole premise of the movie was like, oh gosh. But at any rate, I agree, it was fun. And I do feel that impulse of like, I want to go watch a movie that's just fun and engrossing and like an adventure, right?
Escapism.
When I watched those 3 movies in particular, well,
Wish, Marvels,
and Blue Eye Samurai.
Yeah.
And man, I want to watch, like I was watching an animator thing on it, and the animation looks so amazing. But anyway, I get a little nerdy about that. Almost always, if it's not a clear like revenge story, some of them are, you wronged me and now I'm going to get you. It's at least a chip on the shoulder story, right? Of this is wrong and I'm going to stop you for what you've done.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, okay, what are the overt revenge movies that I've seen that I thought I kind of liked, right? Because there is like a superhero, like The Punisher is a revenge focused.
True.
There's been several through the years, of course. It's always what you've done to my family when it's a man leading the revenge. Maybe not always, but the ones I could think of.
One of the highest rated ones on it.
But not this way. This isn't what you've done to my family. This is what you've done to me.
Oh, good point.
And so again, it's putting these women out alone, separate. I don't need a man. I don't need a family, right? And I don't know. I think it's not going to resonate.
It's not resonating.
Yeah.
It's not resonating at all. This reminds me of something I was going to say. I was going to tell you, I've been thinking about, I think it was our last podcast, when it's been a week and a half now, but you mentioned this phrase, you threw out something along the lines, the battle of the sexes, which is an old term, but it's hard to use gender battles because gender now has a broader context. But feminism, you could say, but this idea of what woman is, what man is, that this is driving the cultural thing. And I asked you, I said, do you think more than race? And you said 100% without hesitation.
Yeah.
You remember saying that? Mm-hmm. Well, I've been thinking about that. I think you're right. And not only do I think you're right, I don't know if you came to that thought observationally. If so, that's an intriguing idea. But when I reflected on it, I thought, actually, that's the biblical storyline of the result of the fall. Men and women will conflict about their roles and how they relate to one another.
Right.
And she's going to be, they each have a temptation, they each have a calling, and now that has come under attack and consequences. Let's say, curse, I don't care which way you go on that. And now what hers is to take what's his.
Yeah.
And his is to beat her down.
Right.
In response.
Dominate and
manipulate.
manipulate.
And there you have the distortions that not only are the problems internally, but now you have the stereotype afflictions that are, you have a thing here, I'm interested to hear what you say, it's good to be a man, because you have, in both of them, you have the complaints that we legitimately have one to the other. Men talk about women being manipulative.
Yeah.
That's that storyline. Women talk about men being abusive and controlling. Right. That's that storyline. Those are both true accusations.
Yeah.
But they rise from this broken root of a problem, broken at its roots. God says is either a curse or a consequence, one of the two.
Yeah.
And it's going to afflict you until Jesus comes and makes changes in you and fundamentally to the world at large.
Right.
That's interesting, I think.
So the way I stumbled upon it, there's a material, and I think we've talked about it in one of our early episodes, material that I use to explain how kids misbehave. And at their worst, kids fall into a mindset of struggling for power. And they struggle with themselves, and they struggle with others, right? And it becomes a pendulum where they go back and forth. And when you struggle with yourself, it's like you're overdosing on authority. In fact, you're going to say, it's not even I will follow the rules, I must follow the rules. And you become a tyrant of yourself. And this is when it's expressed at church, it becomes a hyper-religious, pharisaical view where if God's got this standard, we're going to double it, we're going to triple it, we're going to keep going because we're going to control every aspect, every weakness has to be removed from ourselves. And that's really expressed in a culture of honor, which you see in like medieval Europe, in samurai Japan, right? In the South in America is a culture of honor right now, where you have to protect your honor. You're portraying this polished exterior, right? So on the other side, when it swings the other way, instead of rejecting God's love and making it into a religious obligation, you become rebellious. You reject his authority. And so if the focus of controlling yourself is sort of that masculine pride, then on the other side, that feminine manipulation, when it goes wrong, is saying it's never my fault, right? It's blame instead of shame. And I call it a culture of empathy. Oregon is a culture of empathy, right? If it's a patriarchy on the other, one side, it's the matriarchy on the other. And it's back and forth, and our culture goes back and forth. If you look at the Democrats and the Republicans, you can see, oh yeah, when Trump insults somebody, he insults their honor.
What I hear you saying, if I were to restate it in a sentence or two, would be that you find the distortion of masculinity and femininity being reflected in broad sweeps of other kinds, politically, in children, in schools, in states, in nations.
In every human heart.
In every human
we
heart.
all fall into the struggle for power over ourselves and power over others.
Yeah. And the way you approach it can look more like the masculine virtue and vice.
That's right.
and the female virtue and vice.
So in an honor culture, you're going to admire someone whose dysfunction leans toward honor. And in the other way, you're going to admire someone or you're going to sympathize, really. An empathy culture is about empathy, right?
Yeah.
You're going to sympathize with someone whose dysfunction leads them toward blame, indulgence,
Yeah, that's interesting.
rebellion.
I think that's right. One of the things I've thought too is that we're on it because I would say, and I think you'd agree with this, that America in general is on the femininity side of that, in the virtues of empathy
currently.
And the vices of it.
But Trump was a rebellion.
Trump is yes, that's right.
It was saying, no, we're going back to that old
From
way.
a global perspective, Iran, China, Russia, they're on the masculine side.
They absolutely are.
And they look at us and we are weak.
Right.
Now, when you get into the virtue, not the virtues, but the vices of masculine over feminine, the masculine looks at the feminine and his muscles are starting to bulge.
Right.
Because in the battle, she is weak. She does not literally have the same strength as him. And that's
Only physically.
physically, that's
Right.
what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And so it expresses itself in you're weak and I can take you at any time.
Well, if you look at how, like, as a principal and a teacher, we looked a lot at the mean girl effect. Because when boys target each other for aggression, it's physical, it's classic,
Yes,
we understand it, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
When girls do it, it's subtle.
Yeah.
Often the girl who's exhibiting the mean behavior is not actually the culprit. There's usually someone behind her telling which girl gets targeted today. We called her the queen bee. It comes from this research book that went around teachers for a long time. It's pretty accurate, I think. So you just have to understand that manipulation is not the same as domination.
That's right.
And it does go back to the curse.
Yeah.
Like it's all right
That's
there.
And there's virtues down below them, and then they come out as distortions.
And I think the virtues are what God intended.
Yes.
Because
Yeah, I
God
agree.
says, look, because you've done this, now here's how it's going to break.
Yeah.
Which to me means before you broke it, there was a design.
Yes, I agree with you.
And I
agree with
actually,
that.
I don't know if were you there when I preached the other day?
I was.
That idea of, in I think 1 Timothy, where he talks about women being saved through childbirth.
Yep.
The idea being that God is going to redeem, because the curse is through pain you will bear children.
Yeah.
That God's going to redeem that curse
Yeah.
if you're pursuing Him, if you're faithful, in the same way that God can redeem a marriage that's broken.
Yeah, I think your point on that, by the way, I think it was accurate. I think it was accurate to the text. And I think it's overlooked, it's rejected as a solution because the convulsions of feminine and masculine distortions come into that text and people try to make it do something Paul was never thinking.
Right.
And instead, I think that Paul is after there are male sins, and in the gospel, there are male things. And that's why he says earlier, have men lift up holy hands. And there's a reasons why they do that. And then there are women ones, as in the gospel, here's how you're being redeemed by Jesus.
Right.
And that follows that at the end of the women's section. It is the context for her to submit to the fallen world and entrust herself to Jesus, that he will be many things. And men have their own ones.
Absolutely.
To entrust themselves to the work that Jesus, they're not called to fix this fallen world. They can't fix it. Jesus can. But in his hands, they can bring redemptive things to the world.
And part of what I was trying to express in that sermon was the idea that in our feminist culture, empathy culture, I think is a better word. It was with I could feel the nervousness of like, oh, I'm going to say something about women. I don't know if I'm allowed to.
So let's just go there because you had a point on that.
Yeah.
It's you're off camera. You talked just about how it is almost considered virtuous if you say something tough to a man.
Right.
But if you say something to be hurtful to a woman, it's a different set of responses. What are your points on that?
And not tough in the sense of like, from a sermon perspective or a discipleship leadership, right? And I know there is a difference
friendship.
there. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But the idea, there's a lot of pastors debating each other right now about how we should approach the culture. Because if the battle of the culture war, if it is the battle of the sexes, then we have swung too far toward the feminine manipulation.
As our culture.
And currently in our culture.
I agree with you. I think
And
that's accurate.
Not to say we can't swing the other way, right?
Yeah. Well, we
error.
have been on the other side.
Correct. Yeah.
Right? You go watch the honeymooners, you go watch some of these other things that the way life was, and there was a devaluation of women.
Well, and I actually, and it probably traces farther back, but I think the men who came back, we rewatched Band of Brothers over Thanksgiving, right? And
Let's do this.
okay.
Here's our plug. Now say what you're gonna say.
Okay. Here's
Well,
our
no,
plug.
we have a subscription plug, a support plug, and now this is our something that you can sample. I actually had somebody told me recently, "Hey, I've gotten some of the books you guys have mentioned."
Ooh, okay.
Oh, how fun! All right,
All
you
right.
have a plug.
Well, this is
sample,
a
something
plug, and it connects to what
to
we're talking
recommend.
about.
Yeah,
we
go.
watched Band of Brothers.
Yeah.
My wife and I.
Yeah.
She had another surgery.
10-part miniseries.
Part of her.
something like
It
that.
was 10 episodes. Part of her cancer recovery.
Yeah.
And so we're sitting, while
You got downtime, couch time.
and she's so stressed out. She's like, I find myself not breathing, especially those early episodes are so intense.
They are.
Those battle
It's
sequences.
very intense.
And knowing that it was real, seeing the interviews with the men who are portrayed,
Yeah.
right? Their actual names, who they are.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm watching this and I'm thinking, well, one is like, maybe I shouldn't have showed it to my wife because she's so stressed out. She's like, why won't they retreat?
Yeah.
It's like, because they have to take a stand. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
But the idea of those men coming home so broken
Yeah, I agree with you on this.
and their children began the sexual revolution,
Yeah.
embraced communist ideals,
Yeah.
rejected Christianity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think those broken men came home and said, we're tired of fighting.
I think.
And we're going to make a world of comfort
is
and
right.
wealth.
Yep.
And so their children grew up to hate masculinity. And so we got what we got now.
It created disconnected fathers.
Right.
Interestingly enough, that disconnect lost any feminine features of care and concern,
Yeah.
right? And in doing that, going to the internalizing tough guy became a distortion.
And
Disconnected.
it makes sense if caring,
Yep.
if caring and loving this brother you're with means that when he dies, you're broken forever.
Can't work
You
in a
have
war.
to stop.
You
have
gotta
to stop
it.
caring.
I totally agree.
But what we weren't prepared for, and I think this is where war is part of the devil's work, is that we as a society weren't prepared to bring them back and find healing.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
And we're reaping that right now.
Yeah. So offending a woman, do you think, let's get back to that. Is it appropriate? Are you saying that we should have the courage to say, here's what I found when I was pastoring and counseling,
Yeah.
that I found women in a private setting to appreciate some tough words. Now, their inclination as a person was to put their arm around another person hurting. And they wanted that to some degree, but when a problem wasn't going away, they actually ended up appreciating. But that's in a private setting.
I was listening to a counselor, a marriage counselor, who was doing a little reflection on her practice, who said it dawned on her that every couple who stopped coming in the last year and a half, she went back through and checked. It all followed a session where she had told the wife that she needed to make a change. Because, and I've heard multiple counselors talk about this, that almost all marriage counseling is initiated by the wife.
Yeah.
And most men, and I've felt this in times when Nicole and I's marriage has been tough, that like, oh, we should go to counseling. And I think, oh, so you can have backup to gang up on why it's my fault, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to go.
Yeah.
And so the counselors realized that. In fact, I saw another counselor saying, most counselors know who butters the bread, so they don't say hard things to the wife. They make it focused on the husband, knowing that they're not really fixing the problem.
Yeah.
But if you lose them, if they never come back, you're not going to fix anything either.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, that's a broken culture right there.
Yeah. But see, so I agree with you on that. However, I took a bit of a different tack. If I thought there was basic being still for one another, they had descended to a place of break, but they were still for one another. Here's what I would do.
Meaning there's hope.
Meaning there's hope.
Yeah.
You have to sense that there's enough, because if either he or she is in quitting mode, that's the number one crisis, not the issue that brought it there.
Right.
Is the issue that, because you can't get anywhere. But what I would do then is I always started with the man first. And I would say to both of them, this is 100% something you can fix as an individual. And
Right.
you're responsible for you. And then I turn the other one, 100%. But then I would say to the man, there's something you have that she doesn't, that you're going to give account for, I think.
Because you're called to lead.
Because you have this, whatever you want to talk about headship, it's a something.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're going to bear responsibility for it. So we start with him. And it did two things. Number one, it put a healthy thing on him. Number
Right.
one. Number two, she got to see me as a man deal with him and understand her.
Right.
To say her complaints to him and to fight with him when he would do something that hurt her feelings and he didn't see it. And if I defended her, do you see why this was hurtful to her? You said this. Your
Right.
tone was this. Your word choice meant this. And all of a sudden she begins to trust. Because what I found is that she doesn't want to hear something from me as a man unless there's a large investment that she trusts that I understand her.
And the other side of
she
that,
can't hear it.
which I totally am fascinated by, is what you're doing is reestablishing his role as the leader,
That's exactly right. That's
which she may
exactly
have
right.
rejected.
That's right. That's
But
right.
it still builds trust. I like
Right.
it.
Yeah. So, deadbeat dads. Let's do one more on this, and then we're going to transition to our last segment.
Oh, I was just going through the idea of offending women and what are the things that I've heard recently that might offend them. I don't know.
No. Say
somebody
this one.
said
I think it's totally true.
somebody said that women love to complain about deadbeat dads. Whenever somebody says women love this or women are that, I think they're probably stupid people. Because what women do you know? But you're making a generalization.
80-20 split. You
Yeah,
gotta
you're
go with
making a
the 80.
generalization at any rate.
Yeah.
People love to complain about deadbeat dads. I'll say that. But
Yes.
deadbeat dads are created by women loving to date the bad guy, the rough around the edges. I'm going to domesticate him.
the bad boy.
The bad boy, right? And that's pretty common.
1, 2, bang. Right there, you had two stereotypes that I think are completely 80% true.
80% true.
Number
There you go.
one, they like the bad boy. Why
Right.
is that?
Why is that? Well,
I think
because
there's a feminine reason for it.
no, I do
personally.
too. I think it's because there's a power to it that you could take this wild beast and tame him with
Okay,
your
that's
beauty
my
and your
second
feminine
thing.
allure.
I think that's true.
I
think
think.
there's another one that's even more primal than
Okay,
that.
tell me that. What your thought?
It is, he's dangerous. He does reflect some of that original, we're going to go out and do something wild.
Right.
And she is a little scared of him and a little not, and it's a little thrilling.
Yeah.
And if she tells herself, I'm probably not going to marry him, so I'll get a little scared for a little bit. She likes the excitement of the masculinity.
I think that's true. There's also the
It
fixer-upper
has its
mentality.
and then that's the next thing that comes.
There's
I
a
think.
little bit of like,
if
I
I
can
like
do
it
this.
a lot, I can fix that.
Right.
I can fix that. If I don't like it a lot, I'll go out of it. It's a phase.
Right.
But yes, and that's where I think I've always told women and men, I've had different messages. Young girls, when you have a guy you like, if you have brothers, you have to go to them and beg them to be honest with you. What do you think of this guy? Because you don't see everything, because you have hope and you deceive yourself and you're too optimistic about what you think.
Yeah.
If you're a guy and you're dating a girl, you have got to go to your sisters. I mean, your biological. And if you can't there, you got to find other ones. Beg them to be honest with you, even if it makes you mad.
Yeah.
What do you think about her? Because you cannot see. Guys don't see a manipulator.
Right.
They
Yeah.
don't see it. They think I can, I'm winning her. And,
Well, it feels like the highs are so high
Yep.
and the lows are so low. And there's a point where you're going to get tired of a roller coaster.
It's good to
ride.
be a man. What's that mean?
Oh, well, it's the title of a book. It's just a fascinating.
Okay.
I was listening to an author talk about. He gave a talk to a bunch of young people about how it's okay. Like if you're a man, it's good to be a man. If you're a woman, it's good to be a woman.
Yeah.
And what he found afterward was that the women were like, well, yeah, but the guys were just like, no one's ever told us this before.
Watch old black and white movies. I find it so interesting to see how women are portrayed. They enjoy being a woman in an old movie. They enjoy being attractive. They
Yeah.
enjoy being complimented. They enjoy the eyes of the guy who goes, wow. Or if three guys do it,
Yeah.
they smile. They
That's right.
like it. In fact, there's this song, White Christmas. We just watched it because our family's here. You know
Yeah.
the movie?
Oh yeah.
Sisters, the whole song. There is never such a. Anyways, no, it's actually not that song. It's at the end. The song at the end when they sing the "Going in the Army." You're in the army now, and it says 1,000,000 guys with longing in their eyes. Da, 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 da. Anyways, I thought so interesting. They just sing this so naturally that when you're a girl in the army, one of the things that you like, all these guys look at you and they have desire. you're desirable with a bunch of guys.
Yeah.
And now that would be totally offensive, totally never put in a movie, right?
I don't know. I think this is where feminism is divided. Because if you think about pornography, right, which is the extreme edition of what you're saying.
That's true.
Some feminists hate pornography because it objectifies women, but others say, no, this empowers women to control men.
That's true. That's true.
And if you think of the negative female characters in the Bible, Jezebel stands out. Seduction was a part of her manipulation in a major way.
Yeah.
And she's brought up in the end of things as well.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, we're going to get our last section here.
Okay.
But our little on-ramp is listener questions and comments. We don't really have a lot. We had one once, but we've got another one. Somebody said yuck.
That was our abortion episode.
It was the abortion episode. So what I would want to say is, say more than yuck, man. Tell us why.
Yeah.
Let's engage with it. I mean, in one sense, you could say yuck is a kind of a defeatist way to approach. If it's a yuck, that's fine. But what? Yuck about what?
And our abortion episode did not get as many clicks,
So that was interesting.
By half or even less.
Yeah.
Especially compared to the one about witchcraft.
Okay.
Or the one about sex cells, right?
Those two were above the average.
Yeah.
And abortion was below the average.
Right.
Do you think there's any significance?
Well, one, I think people are tired of abortion. It's so divisive. I think most people have made up their mind about it, so they're not going to listen to deeper conversations. I don't know. That's as far as I've gotten.
I kind of tend to agree with you, but I think that's one of the things I was thinking about is the right. There's been these articles that it's not Trump saddling the right, it's abortion, the abortion issue.
Yeah, well, that's
so
Trump's
you had
line.
the Ohio thing, and then you see, I think it was 7 or 9 states there are now targeted to do the next round, to do what they did in Ohio. It's either in 7 or 9 states.
Oh, to make it a constitutionally protected abortion is a right.
Yeah. And I think to myself, you know what the difficulty is that on the right, it is a true dilemma. You have the right gets splintered because it is full of Christians, and here's what we believe as Christians. If you and I disagree about something, and I think you're doing it with your best effort, and it looks like you try to hear me, but you don't see it my way, or something like that, then I think to myself, you know what? Actually, Jesus is his servant, he's not my servant.
Yeah, right? You don't get to judge someone else's servant.
Yes, that's right. And so I give you leeway to follow your conscience in submission to a master.
Right.
And it's the leeway I want from you, towards me. But I still want to advocate for my position. So what that means is that as Christians, we are never lockstep and barrel with a point of view. It's contrary to our very fundamental idea of what it is to follow another master.
So unless your friend, the Christian you're talking to, has believed a lie, there comes a point where you can say, like, the two moral imperatives are given different weight by two well-meaning people. Is that what you're saying?
And even if they're being lied to and believing lie, you still give them space to have it to. You think to yourself, I think they're seriously mistaken here. Right. But it doesn't. You give them. They have that right, and they have the space, and they're in your acceptance in a sense.
So how far does that go?
Well, I'm just thinking in terms of like abortion, for example. You could have 5 different strategies.
Okay.
And as Christians, we are nurtured in the idea that I'm going to let you have your conscience. I guess I point with my right hand. I keep bumping it.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you have your conscience. So if you want to, and we have talked about this, your approach even to abortion is different than mine would be.
Right.
But
so you're thinking
each other to have it.
The thing I've been hearing lately is like abolitionist view, make it illegal, punishable like murder, versus the pro-life view. Let's sort of ratchet it back.
My only point is that there are those differences, and their Christianity lets us have them.
Yeah.
On the left, it is lockstep. The end goal is to murder, but we'll take half steps if it takes it. We'll be all on board. If it's a partial step, we're good with that.
It's interesting because a lot of pro-choice, pro-abortion folks will say nobody wants late-term abortion. That's extreme view, But if you look at actual Democrat elected politicians, they all say that no restrictions.
I know. I know.
Because the people in
It's just a
power
line.
are actually doing what you're saying, even
Yeah.
though the voters themselves
That's right.
may not be aware of it or don't want to face it.
Yep.
The other side of that too, the two are connected, abortion, because a lot of the Christian view that I've seen arguing, for example, that women shouldn't be criminally liable for an abortion, but only abortion providers, right, is a big debate that Christians have, pro-life versus abolitionists. And to me, it starts to sound a little bit like that. Is it okay to offend women? Or in other words, they're describing women as always a victim when something bad happens. They never did the wrong thing. They were forced into it. You hear that sometimes when people talk about marriage or what's wrong with society. It's all men's fault. It's like, well, there's a lack of good men.
But I think
grant
there's
you.
a reason for that that's understandable and complicates it. And it's this. When you were talking about the kids fighting, the boys,
Yeah.
it's easier.
It's easier to deal with it when the boys,
deal with
because
it.
you see them punching each other.
It's
Right.
out in the open. It's external.
No, I remember that. I remember
Maleness
a girl came to
exterior.
me saying she was getting bullied, right? And the kids love to say that because it's a trigger word for parents. But I said, "Oh, tell me what happened." And she says, "Well, the girls were talking about me."
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, what did they say?" "I couldn't hear them."
Yeah.
"How do you know they were talking about you?" "Because they looked over and then laughed."
Yeah.
It's like, man, I don't know how to discipline for
And
that.
so you and I are guys.
But
it's
she's
even
probably right.
More difficult. I know.
But how do I stop that?
So the elements of girl stuff is
Yeah.
hidden. It's internal.
That's right.
It's manipulative is something that's concealed over
Well,
niceness.
and it's emotion laden. It's
All
relationally
those things,
focused.
way harder to discern.
If one guy says to another guy, like, "I'm not your friend," it's like, well, yeah, I knew that already.
My only point being, it is understandably easier to go after the things that guys do poorly in the relationships of the world
Yeah.
than it is to go after the girls.
Yep.
It's just easier to see.
Yeah.
And that doesn't excuse it, but I think it creates a context to understand it.
Yeah.
All right, let's do our last thing here. Matthew 28. You had some thought about Matthew 28.
Well,
and then I'll ask you a question on John 14. We'll wrap her up.
I've been thinking a lot about, am I on the right track as far as the way I engage with the culture war?
Yeah.
And I don't even know if I like the culture war phrase anymore, but it's the nomenclature. The idea of engaging, like with abortion, with people that are not Christians. How do you engage abortion as a conversation? You're trying to appeal to a shared sense of life having value.
Yeah.
When maybe they don't even have a basis for
Yep.
that. They don't have a basis for life having value.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, think of who are the people in, I don't know if it was Sweden, celebrating that they had almost completely eradicated Down syndrome with abortion. It's like, what? You're celebrating
yeah.
that you've killed all the babies that had a Down syndrome, so now you don't have?
Yeah.
Anyway, so the thought that occurred to me was, are we just trying to disciple people in a biblical worldview who aren't Christians? And that doesn't really work.
No.
It's like trying to raise someone else's kids, which I guess I did as a teacher. It's definitely easier with their kids because they listen a little more. But adults, I don't see it. So the thing I kept thinking is, well, then what's the missing piece? It's evangelism. Like, do churches even do evangelism? I can't think of what church is putting on a play, and the Easter play, or going door to door, or all the ways that you have an evangelist come in. You do something at the park. Like, I just don't see that anywhere. Our church doesn't do it. We'd say, yeah. I mean, and part of what I think stopped it was this hyper focus on relational evangelism being the only way.
Completely agree with you.
I had this conversation at our elder coffee the other day.
I'll tell you,
because somebody said that, and I
That
said,
did it too.
somebody said it's relational evangelism. That's the focus. And I said, where's that in the Bible? Jesus wasn't going and just talking to his friends. He was bringing in the crowds. I don't know. Tell me more. Where did it come from?
Aldrich's book, Lifestyle Evangelism, Moody President, 1970 something.
Yeah.
And that made a change from the tract-oriented, knocking on doors, talking to strangers.
Right.
And his advocacy was that you got to be their friends, man, or they're not going to listen to you.
Yeah.
That's the base, that's the 280 pages of the book.
And the reality of that is when you start out a friendship never talking about Jesus, you end up never talking about
it's
Jesus.
not untrue, but I think it has had a negative impact. And so what I think has happened is that caused this desire that when I meet you, I've got to be your friend and show you how nice I am so you'll like me.
Right.
Then, once you like me, I'll look for a good opportunity to share Jesus.
Yeah.
And the problem becomes what you just said. There are very few of them. There are sometimes.
It's like a crisis.
But it's
Somebody
a crisis.
dies.
You have to make a crisis because it is inherently a conflict conversation.
Right.
That they're, at its roots, however you get there verbally, you are under a master and there's somebody else who's a good master.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
I'm inviting you, if you would like. You're a rebel. You're a rebel armed insurgent.
Yeah.
If you'd like to come back and make peace with the king, here's how.
Right.
You got to submit to him, but here's how. That's a hard conversation with anybody.
And it very easily becomes an ultimatum that your friendship could pivot on.
Well, that's the thing. You have to risk your friendship.
Right.
And lifestyle evangelism, that's its key component. You don't risk that because that's the only way to evangelize them.
But so you're setting up this pattern where you don't want to risk your friendship over and over and over.
Yep.
And then saying, but later you will.
Yeah, that's exactly.
And it just doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen.
I mean, 80%, right?
That's right. The 80% rule.
Probably
and
90.
The one that I like, the word is winsome Christianity. That's what we hear. That's the pinnacle of an evangelical, successful person in America is to be a winsome Christian.
Yeah.
They are liked by everybody. Now, Paul says, have a good reputation. There's some truths in it.
Right.
But this idea of to be winsome, I think, is a mistake. And it's I've not gotten out of it. I can't get out of it.
It's
I've
hard.
Not been able to.
I mean, I feel like my whole experience as a public school educator was training me to do that very thing.
Yep.
It's like, oh, don't bring it up. And like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah. I think this is very difficult. Okay, let me ask a John 14 question. We'll wrap it up with that.
Ooh, okay.
John 14:6. I go to prepare a place for you. That where I am, there I will come again, and where I am, there you may be also.
Yeah.
Why do we assume that means heaven as a geographically separate space from earth?
Because he says he's going to go, and he went to heaven. But heaven's coming here, right?
Okay, so when he said he's going to go is before he's crucified. When he went to heaven is a month and a half away.
Yeah.
Why are those two connected?
No, if he says, I'm going to go and prepare a place for you. So you're saying he might, when saying go, he might meant go where?
Well, so
Mars.
What we think is when I go, that he's going to go physically somewhere.
Yeah.
And I'm going to prepare a place that up there I'm going to prepare. And then I'm going to come back from up there. I'm going to grab you and take you up to what I prepared.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Why does it have to be that? When he's having that longer conversation, he's saying, I'm going to go away. And they say, where? How do we go with you? And he goes, you know the way. And Thomas, thankfully,
I love
says,
Thomas.
I don't know the way. I don't even know what you're talking about. And Jesus tells him he still doesn't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So Jesus is using loaded language. They're not getting it.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if there's loaded language here that we don't get. When he says, in my Father's house are many mansions, we assume the house is up there past in the third heaven.
Yeah.
What if it's not that?
Okay.
When he says, zeal for my Father's house has consumed me, it's the temple.
Right.
It's the temple in its symbolic form that has had a history. He cleanses it.
Yeah.
Father's house is in that either twice or once or more. It's in John and one of the synoptic gospels at the start of ministry. I think John's at the start, and I think Luke has it at the end.
Okay.
So there's debates. Did he do it twice? Did they put him different places?
Yeah.
But the point being,
John's timeline is a little hard to pick down.
Yeah. So that's what I think. I think John put it at the front, and it didn't bother him at all. But the point being that he called it his Father's house. So he's going away.
So you're saying the church is now the temple.
Oh, so why isn't that a potential interpretation? I'm going to prepare a place for you. What's he been doing? He is preparing his bride, his people, the church.
Okay, so this is a thought I had
to
today.
Dwell with them.
I was driving around, and I had this exact thought, which is when Paul is persecuting the church, Jesus says, why are you persecuting me?
That's right.
Right?
That's exactly right.
When Jesus says, you fed me, you clothed me, you visited me in prison, and we said, when did we do that? When it was to the least of these, my brethren, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So the church, how often are we compelled to degrade, insult, or apologize even for the church? You know, we say, well, the American church, and therefore we can talk bad about it.
That's
right?
true.
or the white church, you know, is a common one I've heard lately. So are we just offending, insulting Jesus himself?
Yeah.
Because he says, that's me,
Yeah, that's right.
right?
Yes.
He's preparing his people to receive him
that
back.
whole, let's call it a spiritual truth, that dynamic.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if it's a part of the language of heaven there in John 14:6, because what the single picture we see at the very end of Revelation is the New Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I never thought about this till you just said that. It said, I'll show you the bride. And you look up and it's the city, right?
Yeah.
Where's the bride? Well, language, the apocalyptic imagery changed. So it's a city. And do we go up to the city?
No, the city comes
The
down.
city comes down.
So is
on
the city
earth.
just the people? The multitude? Like the
Well-
church is the people, not the building.
Yeah.
Maybe the city
I
is
think
the
the
same.
city is the symbol of all of God's people.
Right. So
where his
what I'm
presence
saying
is.
is, on that day when the trumpet sounds and you look up, you're not going to see buildings.
I don't think so.
You're going to see people,
Yes.
a multitude.
Yes.
Right.
Whatever we see.
I don't know.
But I'm thinking we may have been duped in some way of reading those verses, John 14, and putting it out there. And then all we talk about is we go to heaven.
Yeah,
when
that's
what
true.
we should be anticipating is that what Jesus is building right now is his people, and he's going to bring heaven down, and heaven is going to be us on earth with the presence of Jesus purified, picking up the original plan to exercise dominion over the cosmos.
Okay, so here
is
supports your thing. This is 2 Corinthians 5. It says, while we are in this tent, we groan and are burdened, because we do not wish to be unclothed, but to be clothed instead
Yep.
with our heavenly dwelling.
Yes.
So what's the heavenly dwelling?
With our heavenly dwelling. Is that what it says?
That's what it says. So that what is mortal may be swallowed up by life.
Yeah.
So the heavenly dwelling, the mansion in heaven, is a body, a physical body that you receive. This body's like a tent compared to that heavenly mansion.
Yes.
And so we will be made
Right.
new. It's not a
Tent.
building.
Because matches the synagogue, the tent in the old covenant.
That's right.
Then synagogue, and then
Tents
the church.
versus temples.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the church that he's building,
We're compared to tents in that way. Our bodies.
these physical
Or tents.
bodies that
Yeah.
are lowly and dying
Yeah.
and weak.
Yep.
Yeah. And so it's not just that the temple in heaven that he's preparing, or the city or the mansions,
Yeah.
are physical dwellings, but in fact that when he comes back, he makes us new
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if that's true, if this line of thought is accurate, then and we'll end with this. What it means is that right now Jesus is preparing a place, and he's doing his work in me
That's right. Yeah.
and you
Right.
and your wife and my wife, etc. And our time may come when we leave this tent and we go into a waiting mode.
Right.
But someday he's going to bring all of them back, and it's going to be the end is over, and he's built what he's going to build,
Yeah.
whatever that is.
Right.
And he brings them all together, and that's heaven, and it's come down on earth, and we get to live, and we're called then to live what we were originally to have lived, with with Eden being on earth. My guess is much enhanced,
Yeah.
but still the cosmos. Now let's do this again.
So here's a thought I had, and I
Go,
don't want to
guys,
go. I don't want to
go.
go too far into this, but at the end, the Bible speaks of ages to come, and this age has been going for quite a while, right? So, and of course, eternity is eternity. So, what are we doing? If this
Yes, that
age
gets into this.
if this age ends with Christ's dominion, with all of his enemies made a footstool, right? And then what?
That's right.
Well, here's what dawns on me. Why did he make such a vast universe?
Yes, all right. I love it.
What are we going to be doing
Because-
except exploring and taking dominion?
This is what I think too.
So if
people get
Eden-
mad at me and call me Mormon theology,
Oh gosh. So I'm not hoping for multiple future brides fulfilling planets in Christ and all that. But what I'm saying is, if Eden was the beginning and Adam and Eve were meant to take this wild planet and take dominion over it, and so now Earth becomes Eden at the fulfillment of the age, where will we go next?
yeah, that's right.
And how exciting will that be?
It's the expanding universe and its planets.
Mm-hmm.
I literally think that we were going to explore and build new civilizations,
Strange new worlds.
strange new worlds. We're going to exercise dominion over the cosmos, and we're going to develop it. like Adam and Eve were called to develop the plot of land, Eden, that was on a hillside. God planted that one, and now he said, go take care of this and extend it, plant it further, make the waters bigger, build it out. Starting here, I'm here, build it out. And then fall comes, it gets abrogated.
And we get superhero bodies. And we get superhero bodies.
We should talk about this some.
Maybe next time.
What
I feel
Jesus
like
does
we're running
in his
out.
resurrected body is quite significant.
Yeah.
Passing through walls. I've told people we're going to fly, and because I like to provoke a little bit like you, and they say, "What are you talking about? How did Jesus go to heaven? How did he go?
Yeah.
Tell me the scene." Just
How did
paint
Philip?
the
How did
picture.
Philip get from one place to another?
Okay, and he appeared to have disappeared and reappeared.
Right? Or flew? We don't know.
That's true. It's possible.
Maybe the Ethiopian eunuch just looked around, but he was up above.
It might have been. But the point is, yes, with bodies that have features and qualities to them that we don't possess at this point. And
But
yet,
not spirit alone.
no.
It's very significant that Jesus, his face is still his face, his hands are still wounded.
Okay, that's true. And yet at other times, he's
It's concealed.
unrecognizable.
That's right.
So he has some possession of himself in such a way that he can show himself in a way that you see him and know him, and he can walk with you on a road and you don't know who he is.
Right.
And what's interesting about that too, then you combine that with how did they know on the Mount of Transfiguration that it was Elijah and
Moses.
Moses?
Yeah.
How did they know? Nobody knew what they looked like. We don't know what Paul looks like as far as,
Yeah.
we just don't know. How did they know?
Well, how long were they listening in on that conversation? And what the heck were they talking about?
So my theory is that, and it connects with Revelation and the name with a white stone, on a white stone, that we're
Okay.
each given a name.
Right.
And it's written on a white stone that only God and you know. And what I think he's talking about there is that this culmination of this being Christian, from another vantage point, I think Revelation tells 7 vantage points of what it means that Jesus is the King of the universe. From one of them is he changes you and I to such a degree that we become what we were meant originally in all of what God meant. So that
Wait, so does that mean Adam and Eve, the way they were in the garden,
I don't think it means that.
that we would be
personally.
like them?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think because I hold to the theory that they should be considered like teenagers. They were immature. They had developing to do.
Yeah, okay.
There was an innocence that they have. I think they have adult bodies. They can procreate, but they're newborns. Right? So you have to place them at a stage of needing parenting.
Right.
Which is, I think, why you don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You're not ready for this.
Yeah.
Someday you will get to, but not today.
Right.
And so I think we will be past that because we will be united to Jesus, and we got rushed into things, so to speak. And so we'll start at a different place. But the point is, Elijah and Moses are known for who they are those guys have never met them.
Right.
I think there are multiple ways our essence can be manifest and made known. And we only think of physical features. That I
You
know
do hear often
eyebrows and
when people have visions of things, heaven or whatnot, they'll describe, I just knew this thing. I don't know how I knew it.
that's exactly
It happens
right.
in dreams, normal dreams, when we have,
Yes,
right?
that's
You'll
right.
see someone and you'll know who it is, even though in actual,
You
they don't
have
look like it.
knowledge that doesn't come by the normal processes
Yeah.
that we have.
Right.
And I think that's the same with our bodies, that we are something more, and that's able to come across in invisible, what we would consider invisible ways. So, all right. Well, hey, you've been listening to On Second Thought with Mike and Luke. If you enjoyed the episode, or if you found something to reconsider, share it with a friend and start a good conversation. And remember, dig a little deeper and think again.
There we go. See you next time.